All right, so get ready, because today we are going deep, really deep into the Illuminati.
Ah, yes, the Illuminati.
But for this deep dive, you gave me this YouTube podcast. And it's kind of a different way of thinking about them.
It is.
It's not really about like who they are or what they're doing, but more about like why.
Yeah, it kind of goes into like the philosophy of it all, even metaphysics.
Yeah, and like how it ties into this need for balance in the universe.
Right.
So the podcast guests, they say this really creepy thing early on. They're like, Satan's greatest trick is convincing people he doesn't exist.
Right.
But they're not actually saying that the Illuminati is Satan, are they?
No, not at all.
Okay.
But they're making this really interesting comparison.
Yeah.
Because, think about it.
Okay.
If the Illuminati really thrives on being secret,
Right.
wouldn't they actually be even more powerful if everybody thought they were just a myth, like a fairy tale?
Yeah.
The less we believe in them, the less we try to find them.
Uh-huh.
And the more they can do whatever they want without anybody noticing.
Okay. That is a little creepy, I have to say.
It is kind of disturbing.
It's like we just brush something off as a conspiracy theory, and by doing that, we give it more power.
Exactly. And this connects to another point the podcast makes.
Okay.
They're saying the Illuminati, if they're real, they're incredibly selective about who they let in.
Right.
It's not about getting as many members as possible. It's all about finding the right people.
So how do they supposedly pick these people?
Well,
Do they have some kind of secret handshake or something?
Not quite.
Okay.
The podcast uses this analogy to explain it.
Okay.
Imagine like a really prestigious school or a super famous guru
Right.
accepting students or disciples, right?
Mhm.
They're not just looking for anybody. They're looking for people with very specific qualities,
Right.
a certain potential that matches their goals.
It's more about mindset than it is about, like,
Yeah.
wealth or social status.
Exactly, you got it.
Interesting.
They even use actors as an example. Think about the kind of drive actors have, their dedication, and their willingness to completely transform themselves.
Yeah.
Those are the qualities a group like the Illuminati might be looking for, at least according to this theory.
Okay, so they're not just, like, snatching up every celebrity they can find.
No, not at all.
They're looking for something specific, something that fits their agenda.
Yeah, like some kind of ambition.
Right.
They're like a headhunting firm for the universe, looking for very specific talent.
Wow. Okay, that makes sense.
It does?
But if they're so picky about who joins them,
Yeah.
how do they actually have any power?
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
This podcast argues that the Illuminati's power actually comes from its small size.
Oh, okay.
They use another analogy to explain this. Think about those limited seats in a courtroom or in medical school.
All right, right.
There's only so much room at the top, right?
Yeah, that's true.
So the Illuminatis aren't trying to create some massive organization.
So they're going for a small, tight-knit group.
Yes, highly influential individuals.
Okay.
And because they operate in the shadows, they can have a big impact without needing huge numbers.
So it's like a pressure point, like a small, precise push can have huge consequences.
Precisely.
Okay, I like that, but it's still a bit abstract.
It is.
Like, how do they actually do anything? What are they even trying to achieve?
Well, this is where that idea of balance comes in.
Okay.
The podcast suggests that groups like the Illuminati, or even figures like Satan, might be needed to keep the world in equilibrium.
Whoa, hold on. Are you saying the Illuminati are doing something good by being bad?
It's definitely a thought-provoking idea, isn't it?
Yeah, it's kind of dangerous thinking, though, isn't it?
It is.
Like, are we supposed to root for the bad guys now?
It's not about rooting for anyone.
Okay.
It's about trying to understand a different perspective.
Okay.
The podcast makes a comparison to gravity in the solar system.
Okay.
Even the smallest change can have massive consequences. Imagine if gravity on Earth suddenly went up or down. We'd either crash into the sun or float off into space.
Right, okay, I see the analogy. But how does that relate to good and evil?
Well, the podcast argues that the Illuminati, if they exist, represent that negative side.
Okay.
It acts as a counterweight to the good to stop things from going too far in one direction.
So they're like the brakes, stopping the universe from spinning out of control?
You could say that.
Okay.
And they give another example to illustrate this point.
Okay.
It's the idea of light and darkness.
Right.
We need darkness to appreciate light,
That's true.
isn't it?
But putting that in terms of good and evil, well, that just feels a bit more complicated.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
And the podcast recognizes that. They even bring up some interesting ideas from Indian mythology.
Oh, really? Tell me more about that.
Okay, so
I love when things get a little mystical.
yeah.
They're bringing in ancient myths now.
Yeah, it's really fascinating.
This is getting...
They suggest that instead of thinking about Satan, We should think about beings like asuras or rakshasas
Okay.
from Hindu mythology.
Right.
These beings are usually seen as like the bad guys,
Yeah.
but they actually play a big role in keeping the cosmic order. Things aren't so black and white.
So even these supposedly evil beings have a reason for being there.
Right, they have a purpose.
I'm really seeing how this Illuminati thing goes way beyond those usual conspiracy theories.
It really does.
It makes you rethink what good and bad even mean.
It really does.
So if we go with this idea that balance is important,
Yeah.
and the Illuminati is that negative force, what does that actually mean for how they work in the real world?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is. Like, what's their plan if it's not just taking over everything?
Well, if they're all about maintaining balance,
Mm-hmm.
maybe they're like a counterweight to all the other power structures out there.
Okay.
Like maybe they challenge the systems we have, even stir up a little chaos to make sure that no one group gets too much power.
So they're like, what, shaking things up to keep things from getting stale?
Yeah, like cosmic troublemakers.
I like it.
That's an interesting idea.
It explains why they'd want to stay hidden, right?
It does.
If they were out in the open, it'd be much harder to do all that behind-the-scenes stuff.
Exactly. And the podcast makes a big deal about how their secrecy is key to their power.
Okay.
They can influence things without being directly blamed.
Right.
They maintain this illusion of control.
Okay, but if they're so powerful and influential,
Yeah.
why don't we see more proof that they actually exist?
That is the paradox, isn't it?
it?
If they're such master manipulators,
Yeah.
they'd be amazing at covering their tracks.
Right.
Maybe the lack of evidence is the evidence itself.
Whoa, okay, now we're going deep.
We are.
So it's like a never-ending loop. The more hidden they are, the stronger they seem, and the easier it is for them to stay hidden.
Precisely. It fuels all our conspiracy theories. Whether they exist or not, the idea of the Illuminati has a real hold on us.
So we've talked about this idea of balance and how
Yeah.
the Illuminati might be part of that.
Yeah.
But what does it mean for us, for our everyday lives?
Yeah.
Like, if there's this big cosmic game going on, are we all just pawns?
That's where it gets really personal.
It does.
If we accept the idea that these forces, the good and the bad, are needed for balance,
Yeah.
it really changes how we think about the world.
So how do we even make sense of good and evil if it's all just part of some bigger plan?
It's tough, and it takes a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing things in black and white, good versus evil,
Yeah.
maybe we need to see the shades of gray, recognize the complexity of it all.
So it's not about fighting the negative then?
Not exactly.
Are we just supposed to accept it as part of this plan? Because that doesn't feel right.
It's not about just passively accepting things.
Oh.
It's about understanding the forces at work
Yeah.
and realizing that what we see as negative might actually have a purpose we don't understand.
So, like, acknowledge the darkness, but don't let it consume us. Learn to work with it.
You got it. Find that balance within the system.
Right.
And maybe even more importantly,
Yeah.
recognize that we each have a part to play in this cosmic dance.
Hold on. Are you saying we're all part of this balance, this good and evil thing?
It is a pretty mind-blowing thought, isn't it?
It is.
Makes you wonder about the choices we make.
Yeah.
How do our actions, no matter how small, affect the bigger picture?
Okay, this conversation has taken a turn from Illuminati mystery to like an existential crisis.
Uh-huh. That's where curiosity can lead us.
It really can.
We started with the YouTube podcast,
Mm.
and now we're questioning the fabric of reality.
You know, as we've been talking, there's this question that keeps popping up in my mind.
What's that?
If these forces are so powerful and all about keeping things balanced,
Yeah,
why do they let us have free will?
that's a great question.
Wouldn't that make it way harder to control things?
You would think so.
The podcast doesn't really address that, does it?
No, not directly.
But it brings up a really important point.
It does.
Where does free will fit into this whole thing?
Yeah.
If we're all just pawns in some cosmic game, what's the point of making choices?
Exactly. Are we really making our own decisions?
Yeah.
Or are we just playing out a script that's already been written?
Yeah.
Well, maybe free will is the wild card.
Okay.
It's that unpredictable element that makes things interesting,
Okay.
like a jazz solo in a big symphony.
Uh-huh. I like that.
Do you?
So we get to improvise within a larger structure.
Exactly.
All right, I have one more question, and it's a big one.
Sure.
If the Illuminati's goal is to stop any one group from getting too powerful,
Yeah.
wouldn't they eventually become the most powerful group themselves?
Ah, the classic paradox.
Yeah,
Who watches the watchmen?
exactly.
It's a real dilemma. If they're so focused on keeping things balanced, How do they not tip the scales themselves?
Right. It's like they're walking a tightrope,
They are.
trying to hold on to their power without becoming the very thing they're trying to prevent.
That's a great way to put it. They have to constantly check themselves, make sure their actions don't mess up the balance they're trying to protect.
So it's not a fixed state of power. It's more like a constant back and forth.
It is a dance of influence and counter-influence.
I'm starting to get a headache just thinking about all this.
I know. It's a lot to wrap your head around.
It really is.
But I think it's worth grappling with these ideas.
I agree.
Even if we don't have all the answers,
Right.
just thinking about these things, exploring them,
Yeah.
it can really enrich our understanding of the world.
Totally agree. And who knows, maybe by trying to understand these groups, like the Illuminati,
Yeah.
even if they're just a theory, we can understand the forces that shape our world a little better.
Absolutely. It's all about opening our minds, challenging what we think we know,
Right.
and going deeper into the human experience.
And maybe, just maybe, by understanding the bad, we can appreciate the good more
It's possible.
and find our own balance in this whole crazy thing.
Perfectly put. It reminds us that even in the darkest places, there's always something to learn,
There is.
something to light our way.
That idea from the podcast really stuck with me.
Which one?
The one about how gods might actually be thankful for Satan existing.
Oh, yeah.
Such a powerful thought, like these totally opposite forces working together.
It really changes how you think about good and evil, right?
Yeah, it's not like this constant battle anymore. It's more like they need each other.
Yeah, like two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. And maybe if we understand that, we can start to get a better grasp on the universe.
Yeah, and how everything fits together.
But here's where things get a little confusing for me.
Okay.
If these forces are always working to keep things balanced,
Right.
does that mean we don't really have free will?
That's a tough one.
Like, are our choices already made for us?
That's a question philosophers have been debating forever.
Yeah.
And we're not going to solve it here.
Right.
But I do think it's interesting to consider
What?
maybe free will and a bigger plan can both exist.
So it's not either.
No.
It's both.
Yeah, like a balance between choice and destiny.
That's a good way to put it.
Maybe we have the freedom to make choices,
Yeah.
but those choices fit into a bigger framework
Right.
that contributes to this cosmic dance.
It's crazy to think about.
It is.
We're all just improvising our lives.
Yeah, but there's this bigger composition going on.
I like that.
It's a beautiful way to think about it.
This whole conversation has really changed my view.
How so?
I used to think the Illuminati were just pure evil,
Right.
manipulating everything,
Uh-huh.
but now I'm starting to see them as just one part
Yeah.
of this much bigger, more complex system.
And that's what's so cool about these deep dives.
Yeah,
They make us question what we think we know,
it's true.
open our minds to new possibilities.
Before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I have one last really big question.
Go for it.
If we accept that these groups, like the Illuminati,
Mm-hmm.
might be necessary for balance,
Right.
does that mean we shouldn't try to fight them?
That's the big question, isn't it?
It is.
And ultimately, it's up to each person to decide.
Right.
But I think it's important to remember,
Yeah.
balance isn't about being passive.
Oh,
It's about actively participating,
yeah.
making choices that contribute to the harmony of the system.
So it's not about giving in to these forces. It's
Mhm.
about understanding them
Right.
and making choices about how we deal with them.
Exactly. It's about recognizing our own power
Uh-huh.
to make a difference in this grand scheme of things.
And maybe by understanding these forces,
Yeah.
both the good and the bad,
Right.
we can better navigate life
It's possible.
and create a world that's more balanced and harmonious.
Well said.
It's a powerful reminder that even in the darkest places,
Right.
there's always something to learn,
There is.
something to guide us.
Absolutely.
This has been a wild ride. We started talking about the Illuminati
Yeah.
and ended up exploring good and evil, balance, even free will.
It's amazing where curiosity can lead us.
It really is.
One topic can take you down so many unexpected paths.
So as we finish up,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you hope our listeners take away from this?
I hope it inspires a sense of wonder in them,
Okay.
a renewed curiosity about the world and the forces at work,
Right.
and maybe even a healthy dose of skepticism
Yeah.
about everything they hear, even what we've talked about today.
Of course.
The search for knowledge never really ends.
It doesn't.
There's always something new to discover.
That's true.
So on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought.
Okay.
If groups like the Illuminati are part of this cosmic balance, what does that mean for us?
Right.
Are we just pawns in some grand game?
Yeah.
Or do we have the power to shape things?
It's a question worth thinking about as you continue your own journey of discovery. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep exploring the hidden depths of the world around you.